I came home to an empty mailbox and a stranger's name on my lease. That was the first thing. Not my brother's face, not my mother's voicemail, just the mailbox, slot 4B, with a little handwritten label that said DuPont where my name used to be. I stood in the hallway of my own building with my carry-ons still digging into my shoulder, jet-lagged and disoriented after 14 hours of travel, and I thought, that's weird. Someone must have made a mistake at the building office. I'll sort it out tomorrow. I didn't sort it out tomorrow. There was nothing left to sort. I had been in South Korea for 2 years. My company, a mid-size logistics firm based in Mississauga, sent me to oversee a new regional partnership. It wasn't optional, but I wasn't unhappy about it either. I was 31, single, ambitious, and the kind of person who thought moving across the world for work was something to be proud of. My lease was up for renewal right as I was leaving, so I did what felt logical. I signed a 2-year sublet agreement with my brother, who needed a place after his breakup, and I left him the keys, the utilities account, and one very specific instruction. When the 2 years were up, he was to either renew in my name or vacate and let the building know I was returning. Simple. He was family. I trusted him completely. His name is... well, it doesn't matter what his name is. He's my brother. That's the only title he gets now. The building superintendent, Mr. Halverson, was a soft-spoken man in his 60s who had always waved at me in the parking lot and once helped me carry a couch up 3 flights of stairs. When I knocked on his door that evening, still in my coat, he looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. Somewhere between sorry and relieved that someone had finally shown up. He told me my brother had signed a formal lease transfer in my absence. He told me it had gone through the building management company 6 months earlier. He told me the unit had since been sublet to a couple from Laval, the DuPonts, who were entirely innocent parties who had signed in good faith and paid first and last month's rent. I asked him to say that again. He did. I sat down on the hallway floor. I'm not ashamed of it. My legs just stopped working. I had a furnished 1-bedroom condo in a building I loved, in a neighborhood I'd chosen carefully, with a rent-controlled rate that hadn't changed since 2019. In the current Toronto rental market, that unit was worth more than most people's salaries. My brother had signed it away, not sold it. You can't sell a rental. But he had effectively handed over my tenancy rights, my rent protection, my home, to a stranger, in exchange for what I could only assume was the DuPont's key money. The under-the-table payment that desperate renters pay in this city when they find a rent-controlled unit available. I called my brother from the hallway. He picked up on the second ring. Hey, you're back, he said, like I'd just returned from a long weekend. What did you do? There was a pause, and then, I swear to you, he laughed. Not nervously, not guiltily. He actually laughed. The way you laugh when someone asks you a question you find slightly stupid. I found you a better situation, he said. The market's crazy right now. You'll find something, I said. You transferred my lease, he said. It was sitting there doing nothing, I said. It was my home, he said. You weren't here. I hung up. I sat in that hallway for another few minutes, and then I did the only thing I could think to do. I called my mother. My mother has always been the kind of woman who finds a way to make every conflict about the person who raised the conflict. I knew this going in. I called her anyway because I was 33 years old, and I'd just discovered I was homeless and I didn't know what else to do. She picked up and I explained what had happened, and there was a long silence, and then she said, You were gone for 2 years, sweetheart. Did you expect him to just sit on a place he wasn't really using? It was my place, I said. I was subletting it to him. He had bills, she said. He needed the money. You have a good job. Mom, he transferred my lease. These things can be complicated, she said. Maybe you should just look for something new. It's a fresh start. Fresh start. My mother, offering me a fresh start, as though I had not just come home to find my life had been dismantled while I was building a career 14 time zones away. I need to explain something about Toronto's rental market because it matters. A rent-controlled unit that has been occupied continuously since before 2018 is not just an apartment. It is a financial asset. My unit had been locked at a 2019 rate, $1,650 a month for a 1-bedroom with a balcony and in-suite laundry 12 minutes from a subway station. The current market rate for the same unit in 2024 was roughly $2,800. That gap, $150 a month, was the number my brother had decided to monetize. The DuPonts had almost certainly paid him a lump sum to take over a lease with that kind of value baked in. Based on what I later discovered, that amount was somewhere around $22,000. $22,000. My home for $22,000. I spent my first night back in Canada at a hotel near Pearson Airport. I lay on a bed that smelled like other people's vacations and stared at the ceiling, and thought about every interaction I'd had with my brother over the past 2 years. The monthly e-transfers I'd sent him for utilities and any incidentals. The times I'd asked, everything okay with the place? And he'd said totally fine. The Christmas video call where I could see my bookshelf behind him, my lamp, my kitchen table, all of it arranged exactly as I'd left it, and I had felt, stupidly, naively, A warm kind of continuity. Like home was waiting for me. Home was waiting for someone else now. In the morning, I called a tenant rights lawyer. Her name was. She prefers I not use her name publicly, and I respect that. But she was sharp and fast and had clearly heard some version of my story before. She told me that what my brother had done occupied a complicated legal space. I had not been formally evicted. I had no written sublet agreement on file with the building. My error. I'd done it informally, in family trust. The building management company had accepted the transfer without verifying my consent, because the paperwork my brother submitted had my signature on it. My signature, which I had not written. That's forgery, I said. Potentially, she said. That's for investigators to determine. Here's the thing about me that my brother forgot, or maybe never took seriously. I am a supply chain compliance analyst. My entire job, for the past 8 years, has been finding irregularities in documentation. Contracts, shipping manifests, vendor agreements. I spend my professional life looking for the thing that doesn't quite match. The slightly off letterhead. The date that precedes the signature. The witness who wasn't present. I am, professionally, very difficult to forge paperwork in front of. I requested a copy of the lease transfer documentation from the building management company. They were cooperative. They didn't want liability either. I reviewed every page. The signature was close. It was genuinely close. My brother had clearly practiced or had someone help him. But the date format was wrong. I always write the month in full, never numerically. A habit from years of international documentation work, and the witness signature belonged to someone whose name I didn't recognize, at an address that turned out to be a UPS store in Etobicoke. I photographed everything. I sent it to my lawyer. I filed a report with the Toronto Police Service. And then I waited. Waiting is the hardest part of any process like this, because life doesn't pause while you wait. I was sleeping in a hotel that was costing me $180 a night. I was jet-lagged and emotionally demolished, and I was also expected back at work in 4 days. I moved into a short-term furnished rental in Scarborough. $2,400 a month for something significantly smaller and shabbier than what I'd left, and I unpacked my suitcase into a closet that smelled of cigarette sits and told myself this was temporary. My brother called twice during this period. I didn't answer. My mother called 6 times. I answered once. She told me I was being dramatic. She told me my brother was struggling. She told me he had used that money to get back on his feet, and that I should be glad someone in the family was doing well now. I asked her if she had known. There was a pause that lasted just a beat too long. I knew he was making some arrangement, she said carefully. Did you know he forged my signature? I didn't know the details. But you knew. She didn't answer that. I hung up. The police investigation moved slowly, as they tend to do, but my lawyer was also pursuing a civil angle, and she was faster. She filed for an emergency hearing with the Ontario Landlord and Tenant Board to establish that the lease transfer had been completed fraudulently, and without my knowledge or consent. She was also very clear with me about the DuPonts. They were innocent. Whatever happened with my brother, they were not responsible, and I was not interested in making their lives difficult. They were renters in a brutal market who had done what renters do, paid what they were asked, signed what was put in front of them, and moved into an apartment they had no reason to believe was compromised. The hearing was set. My lawyer submitted the forgery evidence. The building management company, by now deeply motivated to distance themselves from the situation, provided full cooperation. The witness signature was traced back to a friend of my brother's, who, once contacted by police, confirmed he had signed the document as a favor without fully understanding what he was agreeing to. My brother, to his credit, or perhaps to his terror, showed up to the LTB hearing with a lawyer of his own. His lawyer argued that I had verbally consented to a flexible arrangement and that the paperwork was a formality that had simply been expedited. My lawyer put the forged signature on the screen next to a sample of my actual signature from my employment contract, my passport application, and 3 years of bank documents. The adjudicator took 40 minutes. The transfer was ruled invalid. The transfer invalid. My tenancy rights were restored. The building management company was ordered to reinstate my lease at my original rate. The DuPonts were given 90 days and full cooperation from the building to find a comparable unit, with the building covering their moving costs as part of the settlement. Costs which would ultimately be recovered from my brother. I found out my brother had already spent most of the $22,000. A new gaming setup. A trip to Las Vegas with friends. 2 months of floating expenses he'd accumulated during a period of unemployment. He had approximately $4,000 left. The criminal investigation resulted in a charge of fraud under Section 380 of the Criminal Code of Canada, along with 1 count of uttering a forged document under Section 368. His friend, the false witness, received a separate charge. My mother called me the night before my brother's first court appearance. She told me I had destroyed the family. She told me that pressing criminal charges against your own brother was something you didn't come back from. She told me she didn't know who I was anymore. I told her I didn't know who any of them were anymore either. There's a particular grief that comes with this kind of thing that no one really talks about. It's not like losing someone. It's like discovering that someone you loved was always, in some private calculation, willing to do this to you, and that every warm memory you have is now shadowed by that knowledge. Every Christmas, every family dinner, every time he'd borrowed money and paid it back, every time I defended him to people who found him unreliable. All of it sits differently now. I'm not angry all the time. I'm just different. The version of me who would have lent him her apartment without a second thought doesn't exist anymore. His court date is in the spring. His lawyer is trying to negotiate a peace bond and restitution. My lawyer is pushing for full restitution plus a criminal conviction on record. I don't know yet how it will end. What I do know is this: my rent-controlled apartment is mine again. I moved back in on a Tuesday in November, after the DuPonts had found a new place and cleared out their things. The superintendent, Mr. Halverson, handed me the key himself. He didn't say anything sentimental. He just nodded, the way old men do when something has been set right after a long time wrong. I stood in my empty living room with my keys in my hand, and my suitcase by the door. The same suitcase I'd arrived home with, the one that had been living in my Scarborough's closet. And I looked at the balcony and the street beyond it, and the gray November sky, and I thought about 2 years of work and trust and distance and the very specific kind of love that makes you leave someone in charge of something you care about. I thought about my brother laughing on the phone. I thought about my mother saying fresh start, and then I put my key in the door, and I went home. The price of trusting the wrong people is something you only fully understand after you've paid it. I paid it in legal fees, in toys, nights, in months of a smaller life, in a smoky closet apartment in Scarborough. I paid it in the particular humiliation of having to prove, with documentation, that your own signature is not yours. I paid it in a relationship with my mother that will never fully recover, and a brother I no longer speak to, and a version of family that existed in my head long after it had stopped existing in reality. But I'm home. And the mailbox in the lobby says my name again. That has to count for something.